and the value that you give people when you allow them to show up in their full complexity without trying to pigeonhole them, is how you learn why they are the way they are, who they are, how they got to be this full complex person, right?
I can see, I mean, when I reflect on times of bending toward someone, even when it doesn't feel safe to do so, I'm always surprised, positive, in a positive way, surprised.
Yeah. Hello, everybody. You have joined us for another episode of Cap and Gown. I'm Rachel Phillips-Buck, VP for Student Success at Ferris Resources, joined today by our president, Matt Boisvert. Hey, Matt.
Hi, Rachel. Happy
How's
Tuesday.
it going? Happy Tuesday. I feel like I keep talking about spring, but spring has sprung. Unless you're in Canada, and then it's still kind of winter. I talked to some of our Canadian clients, and they were saying they've still got a little bit of snow. So there's that. But let me tell you, there is a certain time of year that comes around that we have just entered into, which I call summer project season.
Oh, yeah.
We haven't started our summer projects yet, but I start hearing it around this time of the year, right? When I'm like, hey, so do you guys want to do this new initiative? Or we're thinking about this, we're thinking about this. And everyone's like, that's a summer project, Rachel, put it on the list. And one thing that I really love is the rhythm of the academic year. So summer project time starts right now. It's going to go through the middle of August. And then everything that we haven't done in the middle of August goes on the next summer project list. Right?
Maybe you can squeeze it in during the winter break.
Maybe, but we are for sure in summer project season. So that is relevant to our listeners and our clients because we actually have our Ferris Boot Camp that is coming up May 15th. If you're a Ferris client and you're planning your summer projects, and you want to spend time with all of our experts thinking through what you need to do over the summer, setting yourself up to be really successful with those summer projects, we want you to do boot camp with a team. So it's like 2 or 3 people, plus you can invite anyone. So it's not limited to 2 or 3 people, but we want you to have kind of a work team. It's a great way to set up your summer to be successful. And then our second day of boot camp will come in the middle of August when we're talking about setting up your semester to be successful. So super excited about that. I think it's going to be really, really great. We've done it for a couple of years now, and I think it's really powerful because we build in work time. So you guys know that I'm like, let's actually accomplish some things, not just talk about them. So we do a session, then we do work time, and just another example of the resources that we use to make sure that you guys can be successful in your work.
Yeah, it's awesome. What I love is seeing how school, like if we're doing a Spark report, and you just see how their care areas change and the usage
for sure
significantly increases.
And you guys know, another part of summer projects is like all of the conferences that are happening this summer. So we're going to be in a couple of different places. I'm hoping that we can cross paths with you guys. It is always really fun when we're at our booth and somebody comes and asks to take a selfie. That's always really nice to hear. So if you are going to be a place this summer, let us know. We would love to run into you. That would be really fun. All right, you guys, today we are going to continue our theme of the year, which is curiosity. We're talking about our book. If you are interested in knowing when we have new episodes, getting notified about those, you can subscribe on YouTube. You can follow us on LinkedIn. You can listen on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure you follow the show so that when we have new episodes, you'll find out about it. In the vein of our theme of curiosity, Matt and I have undertaken to give you our 4 Google searches of the week. These are things that we're curious about. I have some good ones this week. I'm going to tell you. Do you want to go first?
I probably should because you're yours. Okay. So some of these won't surprise you. So one was I realized on Thursday that it was NFL draft time.
Oh, yeah.
And so that was an easy one, but related thanks to Z, bingo card generator, which is one of my favorite things to do is bingo cards. In fact, years ago, you and I started an app for bingo. Yeah. Anyway, that didn't. We got busy in other ways. Yeah. The origin of pickleball, the pickleball name origin, which I knew the answer to it. There's a whole lot of debate apparently, but there's no debate. It's
cut and dried.
It is. It's named after their dog that they would yell, "Pickle, get the ball, pickleball," and that's how it came about. There's a little controversy in that, but
it's growing in popularity. It's all over the place now.
It's awesome. Yeah, I grew up playing it. Bainbridge Island's where it came from, and so anyway, what number am I on? That was 3. So Wally Pipp. I needed to hear the story of Wally Pipp because sports writers reference Wally Pipp often, and I was like, okay, I need to understand this.
So we should all Google Wally Pipp.
Wally Pipp, P-I-P-P.
Okay, we'll do it. Yeah. All right, my 4 are number 1, Wisconsin supper clubs. Do you know what a supper club is? It is a place where people go. It's like a restaurant, except you have a table for the whole evening. You go like every Saturday. It's like a social event. You don't order food. They just serve you supper. And it's like the thing that you do.
Oh.
So you need to Google it. It's really interesting. It's like
why Wisconsin?
That's where it started. They're really big in Wisconsin. And I don't know. Google it. Fascinating.
So do you buy a table?
I think so. I think you have a membership. Yeah.
All right.
Cool. Okay. All right. Number 2, uncombable hair syndrome. Look that up. That's crazy town. It's a real thing. That was a rabbit hole I went down. Number 3, Moosonee, Ontario, which is a tiny, tiny town in Ontario that you can only get to through water taxi in the summer and frozen highway in the winter. Look it up. It's really incredible. It's like 1,500 people.
How did you hear about this?
There was a murderer who was hiding there.
Good place to hide.
Yes. When they came to town to get him, everybody knew. Everybody was like, why are all these new people in town? Oh, they must be here to get so-and-so. Okay, and then the last one is train horn rules.
Yeah.
Abilene has a train that runs through it. And Matt, you and I were driving the other day alongside it, and it kept honking its horn. And I was like, what is it doing? Well, it turns out trains have to honk their horns 2 longs, 1 short, 1 long, every time they go through a street crossing.
Yeah.
So you can't unhear it.
You really can't.
You really can't. It's there forever now. So there are Google searches. Okay. You said that curiosity-wise in your book today, you're going to tell us about spiders.
Oh, yeah. Let me get to the spiders. So spiders are fascinating, and they're everywhere. And the worst are in Australia, right?
Yeah.
Don't like Australian. Okay. So this is spiders. First of all, it comes from Brain Candy, which is printed by National Geographic. It's just fun, curious facts. Okay. Spiders eat a ton of food, literally. On average, a spider eats 2,000 insects annually.
Nice.
They collectively eat as much as 882 million tons of prey every year.
I mean, I don't mind spiders for that very reason.
Yeah. And the weight of insects annually consumed by spiders is about the same as the combined weight of all humans living on Earth.
Wow. That's incredible. Amazing. Yeah, that's amazing.
I would have liked to have heard how many spiders they estimate are in the world.
Well, last night, my husband and daughter, our dog started to run into the garage, and my husband and daughter said, don't let them in there. Two black widows live in our garage. To which I said, what do you mean there's 2 black widows living in our garage? And they're like, oh, they live in these 2 corners. And I was like,
moved in.
I was like, no, they don't live there anymore. So I had to go kill them. We don't let black widows live places, but other spiders, please eat the mosquitoes. I appreciate it. All right. That brings us to the State of the Union. guys, my throat is froggy today, so I'm sorry. I'm going to have to be drinking. I'm going to have to be drinking during this episode because I sound like I'm sick. All right. Richard Cordray, the Chief Operating Officer of the Office of Federal Student Aid and top student loan official, is stepping down. His 3-year appointment ends in early May, and he has decided not to continue for another term. This is the third person in 7 years to serve as the agency's COO.
So let's be clear, this is the agency that thought, hey, we need to revamp the FAFSA.
Which they did need to revamp the FAFSA. They just need to do it well and not in this disaster. So
he really wanted to put this on his resume before he was,
he can put it on his resume. Also, you guys, we talked about this before, but just to make sure you have it, summer project. The Department of Labor said Tuesday that it's publishing its final rule regarding the Fair Labor Standards minimum annual salary threshold for overtime pay eligibility. They've moved it into a 2-step process. So on July 1st, the threshold is going to increase from about $35,000 to $43,000. And then on January 1st, it's 2025, it's going to increase again to about $59,000. So they're doing 2-step up of when people are eligible for overtime. And after that, the threshold is going to automatically update every 3 years, looking at wage data. So the next time that will happen is July 2027. So just something for you to be thinking about, because our, institutions do pay in a lot of different ways. And so you want to make sure you have that on your radar.
Interesting.
I have 4 articles that we don't have time for me to summarize, but they are so powerful that I am going to encourage you to read them in their entirety. So I want to tell you what they are. Bailey's going to put them up on the screen so that you can screenshot them or look them up. But the first one is an article coming out of North Country Public Radio called "College is Hard Enough, Try Doing It While Raising Kids." It is a great sort of diving into what it's like for these single moms and single fathers who are trying to go to college while they're raising their children. So I just really appreciate it because, Matt, we were talking the other day about how stories give you empathy. And we're going to be talking a little bit about that today. And so just going in and reading all of the things like study groups that college students want to hold at night. And they're like, we can't do that. There's just so many pieces in here that I think is really worth the read. So I encourage you to read that one in its entirety. Another one that I don't have time to unpack fully, but it is coming out of the Heckinger report. Sorry.
I was just going to say, a college that can figure this out will do so well, right? Like 100%. If you crafted support services for single parents who want to earn a degree, you can do really well.
Yep, for sure. Okay, so the next article, also in the Washington Post, is called "Colleges Are Now Closing at a Pace of 1 per Week. What Happens to the Students?" So I don't mean this to be a depressing colleges are closing at a pace of 1 per week, although that is concerning. But I would recommend you read this article because it talks about what it's like for students when their colleges close. And 2 of the revelations in this article that were really heartbreaking to me. One was talking about groups of students who come to a campus. So, for example, students at Newberry who just announced they were closing, those students came from Mount Ida College that also closed. So they picked a school, it closed. They went to a new school and it closed. And the revelations in here, Matt, about the loss of hours.
It's crazy.
They have a student who's like, when my school closed, it closed immediately. It's like by the end of the day, emails are turned off, like nothing's working. They couldn't get their transcripts. She lost 94 credits that she had accumulated and was in debt $30,000. And then she just started again. She just found another college and was like, well, I guess I'm going to have to do this all again.
It's 6 semesters.
Heartbreaking to me. And this article talks about students don't go. You can imagine if you did 6 semesters and then someone's like, sorry, you got to do that again. I'm picking something else. So again, to your point of if we can figure out how to solve this transfer problem and how students are losing so many credits when that happens, I think that article is worth a read.
Wow.
All right, 2 more that I have that I would love for you guys to read in their entirety. Higher Ed Dive has a great article on the 13 years of Title IX policy. So, we've got Title IX's finally been approved this month. There's a lot of stuff in there to unpack, but this article actually just gives you a timeline from April 2011 all the way through till now, saying here are all of the changes and the legislature and all of that stuff that they've put in there. I think it's a great comprehensive look at what's happened over the last couple of years with Title IX. Pretty interesting.
Pretty chaotic, really.
Yeah. Okay, so those are the articles that I think are worth a full, what do we call, like long read, right? Like go dive in and really understand what those are saying. One really big piece of news is that the ACT just got bought by a private equity company.
Nexus Capital.
Nexus Capital is the one who bought them. That means ACT is now going to transition from a not-for-profit to a for-profit organization, which is pretty interesting. This company is hoping to expand ACT outside of college admission spaces into college and career readiness. So there's some vision. Obviously, proponents are saying, wow, this venture capitalist company obviously sees a lot of upside in this purchase. They think there's a lot of market optimism around it. This is funny, Matt. David Coleman, who's the CEO of the College Board, believes ACT's acquisition was primarily a reflection of their inability to adapt to a rapidly changing admissions landscape. Parentheses, the College Board owns and designs the SAT, which is ACT's biggest competitor. So not surprising that he's like, yeah, they're stupid. That's why they got bought. It's a total run. But it will be really interesting to see how this transformation into a for-profit organization plays out for them.
Yeah. Well, Nexus Capital, I looked it up. 2 organizations, companies that you would be familiar with. One is the Dollar Shave Club.
Oh.
See them all over Walgreens. And then Tom's Shoes.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
They've at least invested. I don't know if they're complete owners, but they've invested in those too.
Yeah. So. Okay. That's pretty interesting.
Right.
Well, I think that's a story we're going to have to just continue to follow because it will have some very interesting implications. I would like to call out the University of Central Florida for doing a great job centralizing their academic and success coaching model. I will not go on my rant about how academic advising and success coaching should be the same thing. We are talking about the same sorts of things. We don't know if we're addressing dispositional issues with students or if we're addressing like symptoms. You don't know unless you put those 2 things together. And the University of Central Florida agrees with me. So they have just created a new model where they're taking everybody who's either an advisor or a success coach. Apparently, those were 2 different positions, like different things that they were dealing with. They're cross-training all of them and giving them some really specific training so that they can help students with whatever the thing is that's going on with them. Let's see. They learn how to use centralized customer relationship tools so they can keep track of what's happening with their students. I like this article, Matt, because I feel like the office that we came out of, which was the Office of Career and Academic Development, which I've told you before, where we were doing academic recovery, we were doing tutoring, we were doing study skills, we were doing advising students who didn't have a major, right? All of that, all the career, all of that stuff. We were all working together and we would just say, like, if students are struggling, this is where they come and somebody's going to be able to help them. So I love that model. Good work, guys.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah. All right, 2 more for you. This is very interesting. So students with alphabetically lower ranked names often receive lower grades than their peers, says a study coming out of the University of Michigan. The study analyzed more than 30 million assessment records from their flagship between 2014 and 2022 Students whose names start with a W, X, Y, or Z received grades that were approximately 0.6 points lower than their peers, out of 100, than their peers whose names began with A, B, and C. So what they think is that this is an unconscious sequential grading bias, where you look at your first one, you have nothing to compare it to, so you grade it here, and then as you have more and more to compare, you're like, oh, it's not as good as that other one that I did, right? Now, what's so interesting about this one to me is that this is actually directly related to how LMSs are organizing the class list. They do it alphabetically. And so in a normal world where students are just turning in their papers and you're just grading them, you would never alphabetize them first. Well, I mean, I wouldn't. I'm sure there's somebody who would do that, but I would not. So what they're saying is, if LMSs would just sort of automatically, like the default setting would be random order in your grading, it would help solve this problem. Which isn't that fascinating? That's like technology creating a problem. It can for sure solve it, but it's just amazing to me.
Yeah, as you were telling me about this article, I was like, I would never alphabetize, but then thinking about students submitting their assignments through the LMS, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Need to have a little randomizer.
Yeah. All right, last one, which I haven't talked to you about this, but as the VP for Student Success at Ferris Resources, I would like for us to have a company-wide implementation of this thing that I'm about to tell you about. So this is called a Get Your Life in Order Day, or a GYLIO. So the prescription for this is that students need a day in the semester where it's like, hey, you need to get your life in order today. You got some stuff on your to-do list that you have been not doing, and you need to do it. So these are things like paying bills, doing laundry, cleaning your room, preparing for the week, shopping for groceries, updating your calendar. All of those things, you just have one day in the middle of the semester, and you're like, y'all, this is the day we're going to get some stuff done. I like it.
It's kind of like Tinker Day, but it's like practical. Like,
yeah. I would like both.
Yeah,
I would like both.
You need both.
Yeah, for sure. The golden nugget, though, in this article is the University of Pittsburgh. If you guys Google University of Pittsburgh online calculator, they have a whole page of resources for students to help them organize their work. They have weekly to-do lists. They have semester to-do lists. They have syllabus planning day. Here's what you should do when you get your syllabus. Like, here's how you put it on your calendar. But this online calculator is where you put in how many hours you're taking. And then it in a circle.
Pie chart.
Oh, did you see that? In a pie chart, it says, okay, you spend this amount of your time in classes. You should be spending this amount of your time in studying. Do you work? Here's that taking up. You need to sleep 8 hours. So it basically just gives them this visual of all of the, do you work out? How much time do you spend eating? Which I used to do in U100, but this sort of automatic way of doing it, I think is really, really helpful for students. So I love that little nugget that you can use to help your students.
That's super cool. So this is weird that you're talking about this calculator because, what's his name? Jonathan Haidt? Is it Haidt? Haidt?
I don't know.
The author of The Anxious Generation.
Oh.
He was just interviewed by the New Yorker, and he was saying, if you could show a graph or really a box, and you said, okay, so here's the internet, and it takes up 15 hours of your life. Is that good?
Yeah.
Do you like that? And people would say, yeah, the internet, very helpful. Okay, well, here's a smartphone. Do you like your iPhone? Or, here's 15 more hours of your life a week that are spent on this. You like that? And they're like, yeah, trade-offs. I like Candy Crush. But then social media and all, it's another 15 hours. And would you opt into that? Well, in what you're saying, I mean, just to lay all of those things out, to think about all these things that 20 years ago, not trying to sound old, but 20 years ago, these are all new things added to your week, right? So that's interesting.
Very interesting. All right. Well, that is the
Get your life in order.
Get your life in order. I need some of those. Actually, I probably just need, Braden's listening. I probably just need to say to her, like, can you just 4 times a year, just block off my calendar and say, Rachel, this is the day you need to get your life in order, and it will come as a surprise and I will be highly motivated. So I think it's a great plan.
I love it.
Okay, Matt, we are talking today about our book. What?
And that?
I said it.
Oh, you did?
Yeah. And that is the State of the Union. Okay. So we are talking about our book. Matt, I think you have it behind you. Can you tell us the name of it? All
right. It's Seek. How Curiosity Can Transform Your Life and Change the World. Highly recommend it. It's not a hard read. It's a good read.
I agree.
It's an encouraging read and in a lot of ways challenging read.
So I am feeling a little like slow. Sometimes we come into these cap and gowns and I have 75 things that I have to tell you in the span of whatever time we have left. And I'm like, and this, and this, and this, and this, and this. I don't feel that way about this because I think that there's some space for us to really absorb. I don't think I'm not going to use as many words as I normally use, I think, on cap and gown. But I really want to give space to each of these big ideas that we're going to present today about how to cultivate curiosity. And Matt, we're always sort of walking this line between empowering our practitioners who are present with students and I think for the most part are curious and have this kind of open, interested in students' perspective. But I want to give us as practitioners tools to do that better today. But then also I want for us to think about, I think this would be a great first year experience book, honestly.
Yeah, I agree.
It's not just about curiosity. It's about how you live in community, how you approach other people, how you learn to listen, how you learn to make connections with people. It's just a very powerful book. And so we're going to walk the line of that today, both empowering our practitioners and then talking about how these are important tools for our students to learn.
Okay? I love this and I love this book. So it sounds good.
Yeah, awesome. All right, so you'll remember that we have this acronym in the book. Today we're talking about intend and value. What is the acronym, Matt? It's DRIVE.
Yeah.
So deep curiosity.
Intent, values.
Dive. Okay, deep, yeah. I said drive, and I was like, what's the R? I'm not sure about that. Okay, so today we're going to talk about intend. This is framing our deep curiosity, which remember is something that we choose every day. When we are in a circumstance or we're with people, we choose to be deeply curious about them and about what's going on around us. And this piece of intention is about remembering to remember what's important, right? So intend is about bending towards something. It's like being eager for it and putting your weight towards that thing. And so intention is about showing up in conversations, in situations, in engagement with an intention to be curious in some really specific ways. Does that make sense?
I love so the visual for me of leaning toward, moving toward, bending toward something, someone. That's so helpful because, I mean, the opposite, right? Like kind of shirking back. That's not what we're talking about. Yeah, stiff arm. Exactly. So from a posture standpoint of bending towards something, that's super helpful.
And I think, sometimes we get conflicted because it's like we don't have time always to be in this posture of like, I want to know you deeply. But remember, when we talk about our collisions, you can lean towards students in 1 minute. You can in 1 minute say, what's going on with you, right? Help me understand, or what's your day been like, or those sorts of things. So some of these tools we're going to talk about, I think are super helpful in that mentoring in the moment piece where it's like, just ask this question and see where it leads you. So I love the leaning forward kind of perspective. All right. As a side note reminder, he has a whole piece in here about curiosity killers. There are a lot of them, but 2 of them he talks extensively about are alcohol and lack of sleep. it like breaks your brain in some really specific ways, and it makes it harder for you to be curious. And so he goes so far as to say, when I see somebody responding with like judgment or defensiveness or whatever, what I want to ask them is, how did you sleep last night? Because it is such a curiosity killer. It just puts you in a place where you can't have that spring forward posture, right?
And you were saying this would be so helpful to just like you were saying about being a first year experience book, common read, just teaching your freshmen these things that are curiosity killers so that they can be mindful.
Yeah. And Matt, you remember we did a whole episode on sleep and how important it is, and how you need to tell your students about it, and how it affects GPA and all of that kind of stuff. So I think all of those things woven together are really helpful. Okay, so I want to talk to you about the reticular activating system, which is a part of your brain that tells you what to pay attention to and what not to pay attention to. We're going to call it the RAS, so I don't have to say that every single time.
Okay.
But when the RAS is in full, like, it is super helpful when you're sleeping, because it tells your brain you don't have to pay attention to all the sounds, all the lights, all the anything. You just get to ignore all of that and go to sleep and reboot, right? The opposite of that is when it is activated in life, and it tells you this is important, pay attention to it. So it's regulating where your attention goes. So his example of this is that when you direct your RAS to pay attention to something, it's like, okay, yeah, I'll pay attention to that. So for example, if I said, now look around the room and find everything that is the same color orange in your room. Well, before I said that, you're not paying any attention. I could be like, close your eyes. What's orange in your room? And you'd be like, I don't know. But when you tell your RAS, pay attention to what's orange, then all of a sudden you're like, oh, okay, well, I've got some on my backdrop. There's some on my mug, my sticky notes, right? This is what this system is supposed to be doing. It's why things like gratitude journaling helps, because you're telling your brain, pay attention to the things you're grateful for, pay attention to the good things that are happening. It's why, Matt, you and I say sometimes we're living in a simulation, because you'll pay attention to one thing. You'll be like, he says he started driving a certain kind of car, and then all of a sudden he saw that car everywhere, right? Because his brain is like, you're paying attention to this thing. So activating this system when we're talking about deep curiosity is really, really important. And he says the way you activate it for deep curiosity is you teach it to pay attention to how many questions you ask of people. So when we're in a conversation, you've heard the saying before, you want to be interested, not interesting. How am I wondering about you and asking the right kind of questions to get to know you really well? And I feel like if you've been trained in counseling, you have an advantage to this, because, counselors are like opaque boxes. You're not supposed to know anything about me, and I'm just supposed to find out all the things about you. But it would be such a good skill for us to teach our students, hey, wonder about people, get curious about them, and ask questions, and pay attention to what questions you're asking and how many you're asking, right?
It's good. I mean, I think I just had a great experience with a friend I've known for a long time. Went to dinner, and he has some really interesting things that are happening in his life. And I went with the posture, the curiosity of, I just want to hear about all of this that's happening in his life. And it was just so fun for me, because I would just ask him another question and learn a whole lot of new things. That this is a guy I've known for a long time.
Yeah.
So just being mindful of that and the balance is so helpful.
Yeah. It's really interesting, because this author also talks about being intentional about what you're curious about. So he actually says, like, in the beginning of the week, look at all of your meetings and decide what you intend to be curious about. So in this meeting, I'm going to wonder about this experience, or in this meeting, I'm going to ask questions about why you're doing this thing. And it's sort of that rehearsal in your brain it's like we talk with our students about like, okay, we're going to rehearse, you're going to go talk to a faculty member, but this is like self-guided. I want to imagine myself asking these questions and being intentional about what I'm curious about in my different engagements. And I was thinking, can you imagine with roommates how helpful this would be? I'm curious why, when I see my roommate this afternoon, I'm going to be curious about these things.
Right? I think for sure you've talked about this with middle school. We both have middle school daughters, but also in the high school, and how self-absorbed, self-centered a lot of their thinking just is. They haven't developed yet.
Yeah.
And there's a whole lot that they're managing, right, about themselves and how they project themselves. But it would be a neat, like, hey, college, a huge part of being a college student is this transition away from managing self to learning about others in that. So these habits. But, as you were talking about that, I was thinking about, I love to interview people. I tend to, it's like our first interaction was your interview. I love interviews. And I think the reason why is so I'm not very intentional with every meeting that I'm having. And this is a great exercise. I love what you've said. But with an interview, I totally think this way, right? Like intentionally, like these are the questions that I want to ask. This is what I'm wanting to learn about from this person. It's a really fun process.
Yeah.
And so if you could apply that, even like you were saying, like just one thing, what is one thing that I really want to know, that I want someone to answer in this meeting?
Yeah, Matt, it's such an interesting, I was just thinking about, I had to do a project for school the other day, and I had to interview Shauna and Z, who I spend tons of time with. Like I talk to them all the time, right? But I had to be intentionally curious about things like leadership and that sort of thing. I learned so much in those interviews because I did have this posture of like, I'm going to be curious about their experience of leadership in their lives.
Yeah.
And it was such a fun experience. To your point, we spend time with people a lot, but we don't always ask these intentional questions about random things that would be really nice for us to know, right? So some of the tools in this book, he talks about open-ended questions, which I think is really basic, but I'm not sure that college students always know to think of those things, right? Not yes or no questions, but how and why and those sorts of things. Also talks about genuine interest questions, which I really, really resonates with me. Instead of saying, how was your vacation? Saying, I love food. Tell me what you ate on your vacation, which actually I'm really interested in. Not so much how was your vacation? Like I assume you had a good vacation, but finding something that is interesting to you. What things did you see, right? Did you meet any interesting people? That sort of real curiosity comes across instead of a throwaway question like, how was your vacation, right?
Yeah.
And then obviously he has to have some like disclaimers about make sure that it's appropriate for your relationship. You don't want to ask crazy intrusive questions of somebody that you just met on the street. So make sure that you're thinking appropriately about those questions, but just spending time with people, leaning forward to them, I think is really helpful. And there's some very practical parts in this book where he's like, these are good questions for you to ask.
I just think Scott's experience, what he learned traveling the country and spending time with people who he really doesn't spend time with, right?
Yeah, but very different.
But leaning in, this bending toward peace.
Yeah.
It's really is helpful just to hear those experiences.
Yeah. So he suggests making a list of powerful questions that you just kind of keep in your back pocket so that when you're engaging with people, you can ask them. So I have a couple of them for you. And he's like, this should be an ever evolving list, but I'm just going to read them. And I'm going to just do a beat between each of them because I want us to think about, first of all, how we would respond to those questions, but also, Matt, like how it feels if somebody were to ask you these questions. It takes you out of this sort of like automatic, like we're just doing what we're doing, to like a very reflective, yeah, that's a good question. Let me think about it. Okay, so here are some of his powerful questions.
So will you ask one and I'll ask the next one?
Sure, but we're not answering them.
Okay.
Okay, so the first one is, what is bringing you joy right now?
The next one is, what is on your mind or heart right now?
What reminds you of home?
What are some simple things you do to bring more ease and rest into your life?
What is something you look forward to?
What is your favorite word? I'd actually like to know your answer to that one.
I mean, it might be kerfuffle. I do love kerfuffle. It's such a great word.
I said kerfuffle one day, and you were like,
so Matt, even in that, right? Even when we don't have time to answer those questions, what happens to our breathing and our brain changes, right? And also, I just want you to imagine a person looking you in the face. You know who does this? Brad Lau does this. Brad Lau asks, from George Fox. He is so present and he asks you a question like that. And you're like, hi, Brad, I want to tell you.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I thank you for being present with me and asking that kind of question. So I think it's a great skill for us to learn and also for us to teach our students.
Yeah.
All right. The next piece that I want us to talk about is the setting of curiosity, which this is kind of a revelation for me. I think maybe I kind of knew it, but it's not something that I've held on to be able to articulate. So he says, you need to think about where is the place where you are most curious about yourself. Where is the place where you are most curious about yourself? And it's such an interesting question because for me, I automatically know where that is. I know what that feeling is when I'm like in touch with myself and paying attention to what's happening internally and asking the right questions of myself and like, what's that called? Like just making sense, just going through and analyzing and saying, this is true, this is not true, those sorts of things. And I think you had the same experience when we were talking about this earlier. Like when I say that to you, you're like, oh, yes, I know where that place is, right?
Yeah, I mean, right now, yeah. I mean, when I think about there are like right now in my life, there's a place. But this summer, there's going to be when I'm on my stream fly fishing. That's going to be, I mean, that's where I spend a lot of time. That's my setting.
And I would just say, so the articulation piece for me is if there is a place where you are the most curious about yourself, it's invaluable. You have to invest in that place. You have to set aside time to be there. I mean, can you imagine, Matt, if we just said like, hey, there's a place where you get to know yourself really, really well. And then we didn't make a choice to embrace that and to go to that place and understand what's happening with us. So I think articulating it and then saying that's really important for us to know and protect so that we can be curious about what's happening internally.
And for sure, action item, if as Rachel's talking about that, you're drawing a blank, this is super important to find your place.
Yeah, for sure. And it's I mean, what a great conversation, right? Here's another powerful question. Hey, students, where are you most curious about yourself? What is the place where that happens? That would be lovely. That would be such an interesting conversation to have. Another piece of this setting is the idea that we are making curiosity commitments with each other in meetings. So I think about this. He has an example of like a bunch of friends who go out to eat. And before everybody starts the meal, you're like, hey, so we all have different political views. We have different religious views. We have different things that are important to us. Can we just make a commitment during this meal that we're going to be curious about those things instead of judgmental and rude? Which you maybe don't have to do with your friends, but there are some times where it would be helpful just to say like, hey, the goal of this time together is to be curious about each other. And his secondary step in that is to say, and if I start to sound judgmental, please hold me accountable. I'm committed that this is the way that we're going to show up in this conversation, in this meeting, in this whatever. I think modeling that for students is really an awesome idea, just to say, you're coming in. Can we just commit that I am going to give you unconditional positive regard? You're not going to tell me a thing that's going to make me dislike you or want to kick you out of my office. And you're going to be honest with me and show me respect in the things that you tell me. You're not going to lie about what you're doing, right? What a nice way to set a framework for a conversation with a student.
Man, I feel like college campuses need this a lot right now.
Yeah. And it's really nice because then the hold accountable part is like, I don't know. I don't know if I would have done this, but can you imagine in some of these awful meetings I had when I was an undergraduate, being able to say, I feel like you don't have positive regard for me right now, which would be so helpful, because then it's testing the assumptions like we talked about before, where they're like, Rachel, of course I have positive, like nothing has changed. Let me reassure you of that. Or you're right. You're an idiot. At least now I know, right? I'm not making those assumptions. So I think that curiosity commitments is a really great idea for us to teach our students and just practice.
It's good.
All right. Also want to talk about curiosity waves, which this is where he talks about this being able to spot the settings that might accelerate your curiosity and growth. I'm not going to spend much time on this, but he just says there are places you're going to be where you look around and you feel excited, or you're anticipating, or you feel a little nervous because people are different from you. They're maybe not people that you hang out with all the time. And you can ride a curiosity wave there by having that forward intending posture. So I told you I feel this way often in Texas, where I go to a place and I'm like, I don't know what is happening here, but I am going to be very curious about why we're doing this and saying this and dressed like this and ordering that. And that's a really fun experience. And you want to be looking for those places where you can be in a curiosity wave. And he says also don't ask the biggest, scariest questions in those places first, right? You want to just find the small questions that then acclimate you. And then after you have some kind of relationship, you can work up to those bigger questions.
It's fun. I was just thinking about our trip to North Carolina, going to NC State and going into the library. I can't remember the name of the engineering library.
Yeah.
But how that started. And then by the end of our time there, I mean, so if you're not familiar, this, and it comes on the heels of your cap and gown with Dr. Weiser, James Weiser. And so that was already kind of peaked. I was curious about this library. And then when you walk in, they don't have any books. I mean, there are a few books, but they have a giant like Amazon warehouse type setup where a robot goes and pulls your book for you and drops it in a bin for you. So it's pretty fascinating. There's just a whole, like I was saying, there's just so many places there where I was curious, but I didn't even tell you this. The big one was when I was walking by a group of students and they were talking about their hydraulics exam.
Oh,
I'm out.
But it's a good example of like, these are people that I would never cross paths with. Yeah. Maybe there's some questions I could ask them. Like, can you tell me one question that you anticipate being on that exam? That would be so interesting.
No, right. That's where I'm like kind of being a nerd and eavesdropping in. But
yeah, it's good. All right. So all of those are about your intention to be curious, setting your mind to do it. And here are some tools that you can do it. The last one, I feel like probably our listeners embrace pretty strongly, but there are some things that are interesting to me about this. So this is about value, how you value other people as you're being curious. And he talks a lot about how people are complex. They have their own emotions. They have their own experiences. They have full autonomy over themselves. And so undervaluing them by creating a label is just rude. There's some reasons why you might want to do that, but instead saying, I am very curious, that behavior, that perspective, that opinion I'm very curious why you hold that opinion, because it doesn't make any sense to me. Please help me understand. You're not stupid. I assume you're a complicated human with emotions and experiences, and I want to understand what's happening with you, right?
Yeah.
And the value that you give people when you allow them to show up in their full complexity without trying to pigeonhole them is how you learn why they are the way they are, who they are, how they got to be this full complex person, right?
I'm just thinking about, you with your MFT, right? When you're thinking about two family systems coming together, now you have this new family that's bringing in all the in-laws and their siblings and all that complexity, right?
Yeah.
You just think about sometimes you can start off being very defensive, but if you instead just approach it like, this is a very complex person,
yeah,
I'm gonna spend more time. I'm gonna spend in some ways an unsafe amount of time with this person that I don't understand.
Yeah, for sure. You know, it reminds me, my dad has a story about these newlyweds who got married, and the husband got sick, and the wife was like, "What can I do for you?" And he was like, "Will you bring me some orange juice?" And she was like, "Yes." And she brought him a juice glass of orange juice. And he was like, "Do you hate me? Is that what you're trying? Like, you want me to die?" And she was like, "What? Why are you saying that?" And he's like, "Because I asked for orange juice and you brought me a thimble. Like, do you not want me to get better? What's wrong?" And she's like, "Hold on. I feel like we're not talking about the same thing." Well, in his family, his mom's medicine was orange juice. So when you were sick, she would bring you a jug of orange juice. And that is vitamin C is how you got better. And that's how like she healed you, was these. So then he's like, "Why are you withholding this medicine from me?" And she's like, "Okay, first of all, it's not medicine." But okay, if that's important to you, I will bring you a jug of orange juice, right? Complex. We are very complex people.
Yeah, good.
So that idea of curiosity and valuing other people, he says it turns us towards understanding instead of judgment. It turns us towards love rather than being kind of harsh. But the one that I like the most is it turns us towards connection instead of distance. So I want to unpack that for just a minute, because when somebody is unkind to you and you say that person's a jerk, what you've picked in that moment is distance from them. You are putting out your hand and saying, "I don't have intention towards you. I don't value you as a complex person. I want to be far away from you," right? Because I don't trust you. Well, the truth is you feel vulnerable. So curiosity then allows you to pursue connection with that person and say, "Hey, I feel like you were unkind to me like that. I don't understand why. Why did you say that to me?" That actually is then seeking to be very vulnerable and connected to this person, because you really do want to understand what's going on with them, instead of putting up a hand and being like, "I'm done with you. I don't want to have anything else to do with you." So I think that's a really powerful thing to ingest and also to teach our students.
And it's very hard.
Very hard. Very hard. Yeah.
But I can see, I mean, when I reflect on times of bending toward someone, even when it doesn't feel safe to do so, I'm always surprised, positive, in a positive way, surprised.
Yeah, for sure. This other piece, which I think is very, very hard, which is value yourself. And he talks about like, yes, I value myself. I do value myself. But he's like, are there parts of you that you don't value? The things where you're like, "Man, when I really don't like how I show up angry. I really don't like how I show up scared," right? Whatever those pieces of you are that you don't value. And asking the question, what are the parts of me that I find the hardest to value? And really unpacking why those parts live there and what their helpfulness to you is, right? So I think just articulating the parts of you that you find the most hard to appreciate. And he talks a lot about inner voice, which you and I have been talking about recently, because you reminded me of internal family systems, which is like, not only do you have your family and you have the family of the person you're marrying, but also you have a whole family inside you you have a protector and you have a manager and you have a scared kid and you have an angry person. That whole system is inside of you. And you hear voices from each of those different parts depending on what's happening. Right?
I think that's where the movie Inside Out is so brilliant.
Yeah, absolutely.
Such a brilliant way of expressing this.
That's right. And so he talks about when those voices show up, you're so stupid, you shouldn't have done that, you're careless, you're this, actually questioning those voices and saying things like, when have I heard these voices before? Where do they come from? Who talks to me like this? Who said this to me? Right. And also, when do these show up? And saying, hey, angry part of me, why are you here now? And sometimes the angry part of you is like, because I protect you, I'm protecting you. That's my job. I get big and scary and everyone leaves you alone. And then you're like, oh, thanks. That's super helpful. So I'm not going to be mad at you anymore. I'm going to actually value that part of me that is careful of me, right? Not to be like overexposed. So I really like the analysis of that. And that's probably, we could probably spend 2 hours talking just about that piece.
But the big point of that is being in tune, having that self-awareness allows you then to, instead of being protective, allows you to be curious and to bend forward, right? So
even towards yourself, I think, which is so nice about that is that you're able to say like, oh, angry part, I'm curious why you're here, instead of being like, shut up and go away, I don't value you. Right?
Thanks, Rachel. I feel like that's a nice little counseling session right there.
Yeah, you're welcome. One other thing that I want to talk about there, which I don't think, I don't know where this is on here, but I want to talk about it. And that is the staying quiet when you have made sort of a bid for connection or attention instead of undercutting it. So saying like, hey, Lillian, I would really like for us to go to the park together today, but I know it's hot out and you probably don't want to, so we're not. Instead, just stay quiet, just say what you want, and then the other person can reject you if they want to. But also they can value you by saying, yeah, let's go do that. That would be so fun for you to do. I'll go with you, right? That one is very hard, I think.
Rachel,
what?
I'm sorry, but that's what happened last night when I said to Ella, my daughter, 17-year-old daughter, hey, would you like to go play pickleball? And she said, sure. I was floored. It was like, oh, I better run and put on my shoes before
get in the car.
It changes her mind.
Right.
But that's a great example because I didn't add the but I totally expected her to have I'd love to, but
yeah, instead she showed up and said, yeah, Dad, I value time with you. Let's go do it, which is a really great experience, awesome. Right?
Yeah.
All right. We have a very short amount of time, so I'm going to give you, I said I wasn't going to say that many words, but then, okay. Bids for attention. This is how you find out things about people. Gottman talks about this in marriage, but we're not just talking about in marriage. We're saying lots of people every day bid for your attention. I'm reading a great book. When the waiter says to you, how was your food? When the woman in the elevator is like, oh, it's a Friday, what do you have on your schedule? Like all of the ways people bid for attention. And you can say yes or no. You can say like, okay, I'm going to pay attention to you, or not today. Like it's Monday and I'm not paying attention to you. But I think it's really important to say learning how to bid for attention and respond is a skill. I was thinking about this article that I was reading today about the school where they're teaching their students to say hello.
Yeah, this is awesome.
So this school is like, let me see, what school is it? What school is it, you guys? Oh, Drury University. Was like, our students are walking around with their headphones on, looking at their smartphones. No one's talking to anyone. So I'm going to come up with a new game. It's called Say Hello. We have 10 people who are anonymous greeters, faculty, staff, and students. And they walk around and students have to say hello to them. And if they say hello to them and it's one of these people, they get automatically entered into a drawing where they can win money, or they can win, I think the grand prize drawing. So listen to this, Matt. The university is tracking the share of the campus community that participates with the goal of having 60% of their student body greet the greeters. If 30% of the student body says hello to the greeters, the university will award a grand prize drawing at the end of the month for 4 tickets to the Kansas City Chief game and a hotel stay.
Wow.
So they're like, individually, we want you to say hello, but we want there to be incentive for our entire community. What a genius idea.
It's good.
I love it so much. Okay, so bids for attention,
that would especially help at super nerdy introverted campuses. Right?
Well, listen, here's the other thing. There's another school that is doing an introvert workshop. No, class. It's a whole class for introverts. It is about how you navigate life challenges, such as how to decline a social invitation when you need quiet time or encourage other introverts to speak. By the end of the term, students will learn how to work on a team, give a presentation to a crowd, manage energy levels, and have difficult conversations with each other. So this is coming out of Worcester Polytechnic Institute in Massachusetts. So that is a great example of what they talk about in this book in terms of the flow of who talks and who listens. And he says, you know if you should be talking or listening based on if you are part of a group with more social power, if your views are represented in culture often, or if you're in a relationship where you are often heard. If that is your stance, then listen. And that's more productive. It's actually more helpful for you. So I think about introverts in that case, right? Like they don't talk a lot. They don't have a lot of kind of social power. So we want our introverts to talk and extroverts to listen. And then the idea that you don't have a lot of social power, your views aren't ubiquitous, right? That's a place for you to find your voice and represent what you're thinking, what your experience is, right? So that other people can understand that, because that conjunction of you valuing your perspective as well as valuing other people's perspective is how you get to curiosity. You can't just be curious about other people. You have to step up and say, here's me and here's what I have to provide as a context for what I'm doing. So I really love this book.
Yeah. It's a must read. It's a must follow, really.
It is. It really is. I think there's lots of great food for thought in there. All right, Matt. So I think this is our last show of the
season.
Summer.
Yeah. So we're going to have a summer break.
We'll have a summer break and we'll be back in August. We'll continue actually this book. So we have a little bit more content on it that we're going to continue, because remember, it's for the full year of 2024. But you guys have a great summer break. Call me about your summer projects. You want to get those on the calendar. And we will see you in fall of 2024.